Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today is Lee Chambers, and I've got Lee back. And we're talking today about his book, Momentum, 13 Ways to Unlock Your Potential, by Lee, published by Kogan Page. Lee, thank you so much for coming back on. I know you're a busy person, changing the world. Lee, so where can people find you?
So I am very active on LinkedIn at Lee Chambers. I'm also on leechambers.org, where you can find out a bit more about the many things that I do. You'll also find more about my business at mailallies.co.uk.
Excellent. So, Lee, love the book. For me, it's interesting that you got Simon Ong to basically who wrote the book Energize to actually gave you a quote, because it's quite similar. It's not it's actually they don't compete with each other. They sit alongside, but it's very similar to that, isn't it? So what was the inspiration behind the book?
Yeah, so I think for me, thinking about the many career pivots that I've made, whether it was starting in finance or then moving into local government or then stepping out of a career to build a tech business, all my time as a stay-at-home dad, or then building different businesses such as my wellbeing agency or my social enterprise focused on allyship. I just felt that through some of the adversity, such as losing the ability to walk, having some mental health issues, navigating redundancy, I'd just been able to kind of grow without always realizing it. And the book for me gave me three different things. It gave me a chance to think about my own journey, to map it all out, to reflect and think, where did I grow? Where did I learn lessons? How did I learn those the hard way? How could I potentially support other people who are at those crossroads, who are thinking about doing something different, who are looking for something to, I suppose, to cut through the noise, and get some kind of considerations for frameworks that they might be able to use to actually make change and feel less scared doing so, be more clear in how they mitigate those risks. And there was an aspect of it as well where, feeling for me, I struggled at school writing, I struggled in English. So for me, it's a book about exploring your potential. But as I wrote it, I was also exploring my own potential, because it doesn't come naturally to me. I've always struggled with it. But actually, how could I even perceive or think about writing a book that could help other people explore their potential if I wasn't willing to explore mine? So for me, the book was a validation of my own ability to impart a message that could support other people. And finally, it was an opportunity for me to write a bit of a collective, longer form thing that would be a legacy, that would share elements of my own story, things that I've learned, the 13 case studies in the book of how other people have navigated these challenges and what they've learned and how they've applied things, and to get it out into a world where it will be read by people I'll never get the chance to meet, to stand on a stage and talk to. And even now, with some of the translation rights that have been bought, a chance for it to go into other languages that I don't speak,
Yep.
and to be able to impact people across the globe. So many reasons and so much joy, Tim.
Yeah, and we were talking before we went live about the journey that's taken you through. I know when I was at school, I was told never go and do a job where you need to write. One of the things I loved about it is the fact that it in a way it is autobiographical. It's autobiographical. I can't even pronounce it. So it's about you.
Yeah.
And you actually tell your story in the book about where you've gone through the pivot, some of the decisions you made, some of the decisions where you made based on certain things, and you said, "Oh, this will be a success," and then it wasn't.
Yeah, and I think that honesty, Tim, we live in a world that celebrates outcomes and very rarely the journey. We live in a world where we love to amplify great successes, laugh at massive failures, but never really look at the small incremental improvements that make us who we are, and the small incremental experiments and things that we fail at that help us shape our perspective on the world, that help us navigate the uncertainty. And the world is more dynamic and volatile than ever. And, I kind of wrote the book thinking, in the current climate that we're in, where there's so much chaos, so much confusion, so much, division. How can I write something that looks at how people take that reflection of themselves and then bring that to the world, to be able to navigate through times that are challenging, to be able to connect with other people and realize that we can't make real change on our own, and really be able to think about how they can go through a personal development journey that isn't all about consumption, isn't all about selfishness, and isn't all about, platitudes and, nice kind of toxic positivity, but actually get into some of the grit of real change. And, it's often messy. It's not always very glamorous, like you would imagine if you looked on social media on a daily basis. And actually, we find the threads of purpose in the very things that don't go right. When actually we realize the longer you live, the more the things that don't go to plan are the learning opportunities, and the things that go to plan actually often don't give you as much perspective as the things that don't.
You outline in the book 13 ways to build momentum. Can you share like one that's probably impacted you in your own life?
Yeah, so I ultimately say, Tim, that every one of those 13 lessons is something I've had to learn the hard way.
Yeah. And you share that in the book.
Yeah, and I think that actually bringing it down to 13 itself was quite funny, because originally I started with quite a few more and had to kind of just shape it down to become a bit more kind of engaging and a little bit more accessible. I think probably the biggest lesson I had to learn is that I had to really learn to embrace life squiggles.
Yeah.
Like, I was born in the 80s. There was a lot around social mobility at the time. My parents were really passionate about me going into education, getting that good degree, getting into the corporate world, getting a profession, climbing up that career ladder. And obviously a ladder only has one direction, and that's up.
Yep.
If you step to the side, you fall off.
Yep.
So I think it was kind of really powerful for me to actually think just how much life is like a game of snakes and ladders. You take a few steps forward, you go up on a ladder, all of a sudden you're in these dizzy heights, but then you move a few steps forward, you end up down on a snake and you're back again. And actually, this squiggly career is not the linear success that you kind of told that will happen. These, both in terms of the workplace, you go in, you do well, you get promoted, you go up, you go up, you go up, but also the life milestones of you get to a certain age, you're an adult, you learn to drive, you meet a partner, you get married, you buy a house, you have children, you live happily ever after, another promotion, another child. And it's these kind of very rigid, narrow pathways. And I just come to realize the more and more I've gone through life, just how squiggly that line is. It's definitely not a ladder. It's more like a massive cargo net. There's lots of other people in that cargo net. When they jump on, it wobbles around. You lose your grip sometimes. Your feet go through the net. You have to pull them back out again. And actually, life is full of squiggles. And we're almost in this kind of rigid binary society, scared of the squiggles, feel like it's not going to plan, feel like it's not the direction we want to travel in. But actually, there's so much beauty in just weaving your way around that net, finding where you land, and realizing that actually you gradually learn to climb and ascend, not through just climbing up, but actually falling off, getting back on again, navigating with other people, and just realizing there's so much more than just this binary straight line of success that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, I think that quite often what happens is that we're too worried about what other people are thinking rather than living our lives, aren't we? Just to say that Joanne T makes a comment saying, "Love this. Celebrate success throughout the journey rather than solely focusing on the final outcome." And that's so right, Joanne. I know when I did leadership training, one of the things that they said was always celebrate success, and that can be something very small to something very big.
Yeah, and I'm to be honest, Tim, I'm quite a relentless type of individual. So I've had to really practice kind of celebrating those small wins, because I'm that kind of person who's like, what's next? What else can I change? What else can I make a difference to? And I've had to actively work on just taking a moment to just say, yeah, that little success might not be the biggest learning, but it is just a little kick in the right direction to say keep going, and just a little kind of indicator that change is happening, and that, you know, there are those moments. And I think, you know, we live in a world where sometimes it can be a little bit the other way, where people are in a constant cycle of celebrating success and chasing PR and getting to a point where they're almost engineering an appearance of being successful to mask the fact that actually they feel a void within that. And I do think within the book we cover that a little bit around, you know, there's a real balance between making sure you have those little moments on the journey where you reflect and realize that you are achieving things, but also not to fall into the trap of trying to engineer it looking like you're achieving things. Actually go out and do the work and then talk about it, because that's how we learn and we actually have a story to share.
In the book, you discuss the importance of self-awareness, and how you can develop a cleaner understanding of what's holding you back. So how do you get that self-awareness?
Yeah, I think self-awareness is such an interesting concept because a lot of people talk about it, but the actual work of unpacking some of your own inhibitors, some of your own limiting beliefs, and some of the things that stop you being present, it's actually quite a bit of work, because we are in many ways, you know, have lots of layers of conditioning around that. But I think it's like, I think quite early in the book we talk about how to retain more energy so you have more ability to foster and work on that self-awareness. So I think if we consider not wasting our energy on the things we can't control and put more energy into the things that we can, the things that we can control, the things that we can influence, we actually then get more space to think how we respond to situations. We get more space to actually actively be present, work on negating some of the distractions. And then that helps us to be more aware of how we then impact others with our very actions ourselves. And also, it gives us a chance to kind of practice some of those empathy and compassion type skills that help us collaborate more effectively. Because the more we actually spend time outside of this kind of me and I mindset, and in a mindset that's much more about us and we get a lot more chance to see how our actions impact others. We get more ability to notice the nuances in the world around us, so we can pick up how people are recepting messages, how people are feeling about situations. And that just allows us to be more flexible in how we interact, how we show up, how present we are. And, you know, it's not to say we can just flick that switch and it's easy, because we are in a world where we're constantly bombarded. There's so much noise. It's really hard to be self-aware when you've literally got your hands over your ears because there's so much noise. But actually, how do we refine our world and gradually shape it so that noise dies down and we've got the true space to listen? Because self-awareness truly starts with being able to actively listen, not just to what we say ourselves and the impact of that, but to the world around us and what other people share too.
So how does resilience play in building momentum? And what strategies do you recommend for bouncing back from setbacks?
So I've got, you know, a very interesting relationship with resilience, Tim. In many ways, I have to kind of write about it to an extent because of where it is in literature. But it's really funny because 10 years ago, the only people that ever talked about resilience were people who studied military veterans who'd been in the harshest scenarios. And we're actually looking at resilience in terms of engineering tolerance of bridges or crops that grew in really acrid conditions and didn't get that much water. So it's used in so many different contexts. But what I find really interesting about resilience is we almost need to reframe it away from this idea of being robust and endurant. Actually, resilience is about being flexible. Resilience is being able to actually create space to breathe and to rest properly. And actually, resilience so often is thinking about potentially doing less than doing more, not just another productivity hack or well-being tip, but actually about doing a bit less so you've got the energy to be resilient, but actually to kind of train that muscle and realize that it's not about hanging on and not quitting. It's not about surviving. It's actually about thinking how you give yourself space to both re-energize yourself, be flexible, and realize that resilience is a team sport. Like the most resilient people know when to ask for help, know when to take a step back and pause, and know when to fully step out and quit. And, you know, again, in the book, we go through some questioning about how we can actually identify that, because it's not about just quitting when things get hard, but there is a time when the effort that we're putting in doesn't match the output that we're going to get out in the future. And resilient people know when to step out. They know when to ask for help. They know when to really push on and compound, and they are patient and actually see that small actions build up over time, and they practice that muscle. So yeah, resilience is so often about the pause, about the rest, about the teamwork, even though sometimes it's sold as this one person, endurant, robust machine that just keeps stoically marching on through the winds and the storm. We're human, and actually resilience is so often about the flex and about a collective effort.
And what role does mindset play in terms of, we talk a lot about fixed mindset and growth mindset. What do you see in terms of mindset and talk about in the book?
Yeah, so I think again, mindset's a really interesting one where sometimes people say, "Oh, it's just about mindset, just about your mindset." And the truth is, we live in an environment that we interact with. We live surrounded by other people, by influences, by systems that shape and change how we interact, who we are. I'm really passionate about us as humans being really kind of neuroplastic and flexible. We have the ability to learn. How we see the world definitely shapes how we respond to it. And I think there is something within everyone to think about how they can expand the mindset of the possibility. Our potential is unknowable until we explore it. And it's not until we explore some new pathways, we look at things a little bit differently, and we actually consider what we can do and what we can learn and how we can do that over time, that we actually start to see how mindset can benefit us. Obviously, mindset can also be a limitation, but I think as we refer straight into the book very early on about having a flexible vision instead of a fixed goal, I'm really passionate that we don't limit ourselves by having really rigid fixed goals. And people love a SMART goal, being able to reference it, to being really specific and measurable and timely. But actually, in life, there are so many variables. I actually love to say the mindset of having a flexible vision, so a vision of where we can move towards, that will shape and shift over time. There's enough vision to know how to move forward, to turn that flexible vision into some small steps that can be taken towards it, but to know that you can pivot and move slightly and flex rather than having this fixed goal that we move towards, that actually, if we don't meet it, if we start to move towards it, away from it due to external forces, can actually impact our mindset, how we see ourselves, and how we feel. So mindset is just a small part of this. And again, in the book, we expand on how to use mindset, but not just on its own, because our mindset doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's one part of the many aspects of ourselves that we can bring forward to learn, to flourish, and to test ourselves, as well as our mindset moving beyond failure and realizing that actually things that don't go right are often an experiment, and that means we can learn something as well as realize what maybe not to do again.
Yeah. Andrew Slessor, who's a watcher and listener very often. Andrew says, "Good afternoon. I would say that most men don't know when to step back. That is changing nowadays, though, a more open approach to mental health."
Yeah, I think that we definitely are having more conversations. I think there's still a lot to be done, and the world as it is today and the systems around us put a lot of pressure on humans. But I do think, and you know this, Tim, a lot of male leaders love to talk and take up a lot of space. And the best leaders I've met, they just yield the space, let other people, do much of the talking. And then just when they talk, they don't say much, but it's really impactful.
So just quickly, give us some examples of where this has happened, where you've used or examples from the book where you talk about your own life.
So if I think about, there's so much I could share. You're going to need to buy the book to really dig into them.
You do need to buy the book.
But even in my kind of first business, we had an idea for a business on the side. We built one. It worked really well. And that was driven by a flexible vision of what was possible. But we also had another side project that we built, and it went terribly and almost put us out of business. And I reflect back and realize, and I was quite emotional about it because I was invested. And when I started to strip that emotion back and look what had happened, I actually started to learn. And that again comes to, failure being an indicator of how we can grow, what we can learn, what was holding me back personally and meant that I made some poor decisions, and what made us not as strategic as we could be. And it's really fascinating because so many businesses fail. There's so many lessons within that. But actually, the pain of a business failing can sometimes stop you from exploring it. That's just one thing, as well as me having to learn to walk again. I learned one of the lessons through that, and me being a stay-at-home dad for a period after stepping out of leadership of the business that I'd built. And I can underpin 5 of the lessons and things that I learned. It's easier to look after and lead 100 adults than it is to look after and try and lead 2 toddlers. That was a very effective leadership and development training course. I'll say that.
Lee, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Momentum, 13 Ways to Unlock Potential, published through Kogan Page. And if we wanted to buy a copy, we could get one on Oxfam, on Amazon.
So Amazon, Waterstones, WH Smiths, and Kogan Page website themselves.
Okay. And where can we find more information about you, Lee?
So again, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Find Lee Chambers, leechambers.org to find out a bit more about the numerous things I'm involved in. And my latest project, Male Allies UK, where we do work around male allyship, work with boys in schools, and make inclusion a bit different than it historically has been, making sure it includes everyone. And it's a skill, not an ideology.
Yeah. Lee, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book and your experiences. Love the work that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim.